Hey everybody, Qroo Paul here from 2Expats Mexico. Welcome to the channel. If you missed my last video, I covered the requirements to get Mexican citizenship. I had a lot of follow-up questions from that, such as what are the benefits of getting Mexican citizenship? Will I lose my American or Canadian citizenship if I get Mexican citizenship? Things like that. I'm actually going to be answering all of those in today's video. In today's video, I'll be talking about the different residency options people tend to choose when they move to Mexico. First on that list is going to be the perpetual tourist. I'll explain more about that in the video. Number 2 is going to be temporary residents. Third is going to be permanent residents. And the last one is going to be Mexican citizens. All the pros and cons of each. That way you can make an educated decision if you're in the planning stage of your move to Mexico. If you like videos like this one and you want to see more, you'll just take the time to hit the like button. And if you're not already a subscriber, hit the subscribe button and the little bell. That way you'll get a notification anytime I come out with something new, and I've got a lot planned. All right, let's get started. We're going to go ahead and kick this thing off by talking about the perpetual tourists. I think I was a little late on my air quotes. Let's try again. Perpetual tourists. That was a little bit better. If you've been watching my videos, you already know what a perpetual tourist is. You can come to Mexico as a tourist for up to 180 days without any type of special visa. Now these folks actually live in Mexico. They come as tourists, and every 180 days they cross a border, even just for the day, cross back and start the 180-day clock over. Now they may cross by land into the US or go to the southern border and cross into Belize, or they may fly somewhere, visit some family, and then come right back. That's the perpetual tourist. I know a lot of expats that have chosen this route. They just say it's a lot easier. Many of them didn't make the financial requirements to qualify for either temporary or residency when they first applied, so they just decided to be perpetual tourists. They're not working in Mexico anyway, so they're like, this just seems easiest. So what are the benefits of being a perpetual tourist? Well, number 1, as I mentioned, you didn't have to meet any type of financial requirements like you would have if you went through temporary or permanent residency. I'm going to do a completely different video talking about financial requirements because they can get a little complex. 2, they can bring a foreign plated car into Mexico without any problem. When I say foreign plated, I mean normally a car from their own country, either from the United States or Canada. Most of the folks who watch this channel are from the US or Canada, so I tend to talk about those two countries primarily. The next one is you didn't have to incur any of the expenses involved in actually getting residency or citizenship. And those expenses aren't just the fees paid to the government, those can also be the fees paid to a lawyer or immigration specialist to help you with all this paperwork. You didn't have to worry about any of that. You just basically got your little FMM card, which is your tourist card, and you came into Mexico. Pretty easy, right? You might be thinking to yourself, this sounds like a pretty good option, Paul, with the perpetual tourist. What are the disadvantages? Well, there are disadvantages. One of them is if you are entering Mexico and you're going to go beyond 25 kilometers from the border, you have to actually get a tourist card, even if you're entering by land. When you come by air, it's going to be part of it. And each time you get a tourist card, that's going to be 594 pesos, or roughly around 30 bucks. Now you may be thinking, that's not a lot of money, but you're going to be paying that about twice a year, or however often you re-enter. One of the things you may have trouble with is opening a bank account in Mexico. I spent the last couple of weeks making contact with numerous banks across Mexico, BBVA, Santander, Inbursa, etc., and asking what the requirements are for foreigners to open a checking or savings account. And so far, all of the answers have been they need to at least have proof of residency, either temporary or permanent, and proof of address in Mexico. That being said, you are always going to have those folks that say, Paul, I came down to Mexico as a tourist. I opened a bank account with no problem. They didn't ask me anything. Yeah. Some of those were a few years ago and they've kind of cracked down. In fact, we just went to renew our debit cards at a bank in Mexico recently because they came up on the 5 years, so they were expiring. And they asked for our immigration documents again, just to make sure that we could have a bank account. At that time when we questioned the manager, he says that the entire banking industry had gotten stricter in the last year or two in Mexico. Still, the only thing that is truly consistent about Mexico and the bureaucracy and how things work is that it is inconsistent. You may have 10 friends go to the bank and they're all turned down because they don't have immigration documents, and the 11th friend, I don't know, goes at lunch when all the people that really know what's going on are gone and the new hires up front and they come out with a bank account. The next one is you're going to have difficulty registering a vehicle. That's important for you folks that come down to Mexico and buy a vehicle. Now, when it comes to asking about immigration status and having to prove residency to register a vehicle, it differs widely by jurisdiction. Mexico has 31 states and 1 federal district. In that way, it's kind of similar to the United States of America. And each one of those states is going to have their own rules. Well, within those states, you're going to have municipalities that tend to have their own rules also. Some are going to ask for immigration documents, some are not. So you may have difficulty there. Getting a driver's license in Mexico. You may have difficulty getting that without residency. Now, I know anytime I talk about this, people go, well, can't I drive with my foreign license, Paul? Yeah, you can drive with your foreign license down here. But there are advantages to getting a Mexican license here. One of the big advantages is we use it to take advantage of locals' discounts. Now, our residency card doesn't have an address, and a lot of our locals' discounts are because we live in the state of Quintana Roo. So we want to show our address that we live in Quintana Roo. Those discounts can be substantial. At some of the theme parks we have in Quintana Roo, they're more than 50% off. We save at restaurants sometimes anywhere from 15 to 30% off we've actually gotten. We save at private hospitals, everywhere. So this driver's license is really beneficial to have. I'm going to move on to something called an INAPM card. An INAPM card is a senior citizen card. It's issued to people 60 years of age or older. And if you look at the official website for the government, it says you can only get this if you're either a temporary or permanent resident or citizen. In actual practice, lately I've been getting a lot of emails from folks who said they've gone down as temporary residency and been denied. I've been told it's now just permanent and citizenship, but they have not updated their website. So as a tourist, you're not going to get that. Another big disadvantage, obviously, you're going to have to try to plan your trips to make sure that you leave the country every 6 months. Now, during the pandemic, some people have been able to actually go to an immigration office and get an extension on their tourist card without leaving. That's not a common thing. Normally, you're just going to have to plan your trips. And if you brought a vehicle in with a temporary import permit, which we commonly call a TIP, if you're looking at Facebook groups and things, that TIP is going to expire when that say that tourist card expires, that FMM. So you got 180 days. So if you choose to set up shop, I don't know, live in Mexico City, and you're like, oh, my 180 days for being a tourist is running out. Why don't I just fly to Florida or see some relatives and fly back? Your car is the problem. Your car has to leave Mexico too. And the last big disadvantage of living here as a perpetual tourist is that there is a danger that you'll be identified as abusing the system, coming too often, back and forth, and actually being barred from re-entering. You'll see this brought up a lot in Facebook groups about how immigration in Mexico are going to crack down now on these perpetual tourists. I've been hearing that for almost 6 years now. You'll hear about isolated cases where somebody is, say they flew back to Canada, when they came back, they got flagged, questioned a little bit about the airport, how long they were living here, and then were banned from coming back to Mexico for 1 year. Those cases are rare. I've looked into a few over the years because I was curious what made this case different as opposed to others. In every case that I looked at, these were not simply people who were living in Mexico and possibly working remotely, you know, in jobs from their home country. These were folks that were working here in Mexico, meaning taking jobs in Mexico. For example, they worked in tourism or property management or something like this. In a lot of the cases, it appears that someone turn them in. So now let's move on to temporary residency. In order to get temporary residency, for you folks that don't know, that adventure usually starts outside of Mexico, normally in your home country, but it doesn't have to be your home country, just anywhere outside of Mexico. You go to a Mexican consulate, fill out all the paperwork, and it depends what kind of residency, temporary residency you're trying to get, if it's through marrying a Mexican citizen, etc. There's different types. I talk a little bit about some of those in the citizenship video. But let's say it's just you want to come to Mexico. You're going to work remotely online from here and hang out on beaches, have a good time, or you're retired and you have some kind of pension income. You're going to go to the Mexican consulate, show them proof of financials to show that you meet the minimum financial requirements. Again, I'm going to have an entire video about the financial requirements because it's not as easy as me just throwing a number up on the screen. Once the consulate determines that you meet the requirements for temporary residency, you'll be given a big visa sticker inside of your passport. You'll go down to Mexico and finish part 2. Most cases, you're going to get a 1-year temporary resident card. And after 1 year, you can decide to renew it for a period of 1, 2, or 3 years because you have temporary residency up to 4 years. After 4 years, you can fill out some other paperwork to transition into permanent residency, and you won't have to show all of the financial requirements again. That's kind of nice. I'll have a video about that too. I know, I keep talking about all these other videos I'm going to do. And you're going to be like, when is this coming out, Paul? And I'm like, I'm so busy. I don't know. I should hire a production staff or something. So what are the advantages of having this? Well, a big one is you don't have to worry about leaving Mexico every 6 months. You are a temporary resident for the time that the residency is valid. Now, if let's say you came for your 1 year and you're in the process of renewing, but you haven't gotten the new card yet, you're still legally in Mexico. You can just hang out here. There is no requirement for you to leave Mexico while you have this. Another advantage is you can bring a foreign plated card with you into Mexico. Now, if you go to a place where you need a temporary import permit, then that temporary import permit is valid for the length of time that your residency card is valid. That's also really great. You don't have to worry about running this car to a border every 6 months, right? You can open a Mexican banking account. You can register a car in Mexico. You can get a driver's license in Mexico. And as far as that a NAPM card thing, maybe you can get it. You might have to be permanent for that. They seem pretty strict at that particular office. I don't know. Another advantage for those folks who are moving to Mexico and want to bring a lot of their stuff with them. I don't know why they would, because we have stuff in Mexico, but there are always those folks who like to make things a lot more arduous than they need to be, so they want to bring everything with them. Anyway, those folks can actually bring a lot of their household items duty-free under something that's called a certificado de menaje de casa. I'll be having a video on that as well. When you're under temporary residency, you're actually temporarily importing these items into Mexico. When you change to permanent, then they are permanently imported, if you decide to do that. If you don't, then Mexico wants you to take all your junk with you if you choose to leave Mexico. They don't want you leaving that junk down here. Another advantage is you won't have any difficulty participating in the public health care plans that you have here, whether you want to fall under IMSS or INSABI. I have a video explaining these two systems. You can watch it after this one. So let's talk about working. With temporary residency, it doesn't mean you can just work anywhere you want and just do anything you want. When I moved to Mexico, I came as a retiree, and my temporary residency did not cover working at all. Now, when you come down, you can actually, say, get sponsored by an employer if they're already registered with immigration and authorized to hire foreigners. As you can see, there's some bureaucracy involved, but you folks with temporary residency, if you go through all the steps, can work legally in Mexico. So what are the disadvantages to having temporary residency? Well, one is you have to meet those financial requirements that I talked about, that I'll be talking about in another video. The next thing is you're going to have to incur these costs, the costs of applying, all the government fees, and when you do part 2 of your residency process in Mexico, the forms are in Spanish and some of the procedures can confuse some folks, so it's easier to hire somebody to do this for you, so you're going to have those costs. When your temporary residence card is about to expire and you have to renew, it's not as easy as, say, renewing a driver's license in the US. I'm not just going online, clicking a box, and they mail me my new one. I need to submit all of this paperwork again, just not the financials, but all of this other paperwork. I have to get fingerprints again. I don't know why. I take another photo, even though it's only been a year. It can be a pain. So again, that's kind of a disadvantage. So let's move on to permanent residency. What are the advantages to living in Mexico under permanent residency? Well, you're going to have a lot of the same ones you have in temporary residency. One is you don't have to worry about leaving the country every so often. You are here permanently. You can stay all year. You can stay year after year and never leave Mexico. You can open a bank account easily. You can register a car. You can get a driver's license. You can take advantage of the public health care system without any trouble whatsoever. You will be able to get one of those NAPM cards. That's the senior citizen card for those folks that are 60 years of age or older. A lot of discounts come with that. It's probably worth it. You'll be able to import your household items into Mexico duty-free under the menaje de casa that I mentioned before. That's a big advantage for you folks that like to lug your stuff all over the world. I'm not one of those people. I just don't see the point. Another advantage to permanent residency is it does not expire. You don't have to worry about renewing this thing unless you're a child. If you're a child, yes, there are some renewals. Once you're an adult, you never have to renew this. As a permanent resident, you are authorized to work in Mexico. You could set something up yourself. Maybe you want to set up a Mexican corporation, run a little business, or you can work for an employer that's authorized to hire foreign employees. That means that they've registered with immigration, filled out all the requisite paperwork. There's a lot of bureaucracy and paperwork in Mexico. You can't always just jump to permanent residency when you go to the consulate's office outside of Mexico. There's a couple fast-track ways. One of them is to be a retiree or pensioner, and you also meet these certain financial requirements. Now, if you want to know what the financial requirements are right now, go to the actual consulate that you plan on visiting, try to find it on their website or email them. Those amounts are going to change by consulate, and I'm going to explain that in the video I'm going to dedicate to that topic. Anyway, those financial requirements are higher than they would be for just temporary residency. That sometimes is a deal breaker for people. Actually, Lynn and I both have our permanent residency in Mexico, and pretty happy with it. It's going well. Probably the biggest disadvantage to having permanent residency is you cannot drive a foreign plated vehicle in Mexico. You can't get a temporary import permit for it. You should be driving it down here. That's a problem for people that want to bring their cars down. They get permanent residency, say at the consulate, now they're like, oh, I thought I was going to bring my car down with my Colorado plates. Well, can't I just nationalize it into Mexico? There is an option to permanently import a vehicle into Mexico, but the requirements to do so are very strict based on the age of the vehicle and also where it's manufactured. I'm going to have a video about that as well. I know, more and more videos. If you're just hanging out right on the border or in Baja California is like its own thing. I usually talk about what the laws are in Mexico, and then I talk about what happens in Baja. Baja is kind of like the Wild West. You do have people with permanent residency that just drive down, and because there's no temporary import permits required, nobody checks that, so they're not having cars seized like some people are in other parts of the country. It's its own thing. Still, if you want to bring that foreign plated car into the rest of Mexico, you may have some problems. Now let's move on to our very last residency option, and that is to obtain Mexican citizenship. Now, in case you missed the video on this, you don't just decide to be a Mexican citizen when you show up. You're not like, well, I was going to go for residency, but I like that Mexican citizen option. I'm just going to start with that. It doesn't work that way. If you want to learn what the requirements are and time frames involved in getting Mexican citizenship, you should watch that video after this one. Let's talk about the benefits. The benefits to being a Mexican citizen are what you would expect, and it's some of the same ones we talked about with even permanent and temporary. You can open a bank account, you can register a car, you can get a driver's license. Those things are pretty easy. Let's talk about employment. As a temporary or permanent resident, you're going to have worked for an employer that's actually authorized to hire foreigners. As a Mexican citizen, you don't have to worry about that. You can go get those jobs. Now, you won't be able to apply for every job because there are jobs in Mexico that are just for Mexicans by birth. I may do a video on those because some of those jobs may surprise you. They surprised me. As a Mexican citizen, you will be able to hold direct title to land inside the restricted zone. And that's if you're buying property within 50 kilometers of a coast or 100 kilometers of a border. Now, if you're like, what are you talking about, restricted zones? And I actually have a video about foreigners buying property in Mexico. If you have questions about restricted zones, non-restricted zones, and ejido land and requirements for foreigners, you'll find it all in there. You can watch it after this one. See, there's a video I've actually already done. So what about the disadvantages to obtaining Mexican citizenship? One of the big ones is going to be the foreign plated car. You're still going to have the same problems you would have had as a permanent resident. Now, this doesn't apply to Mexican citizens that live permanently in the US or just vacationing in Mexico and they can prove that, but I'm talking about folks who are going to move to Mexico. And I'm assuming that's why you're watching the video, because that's what you're going to do. Those folks will have to nationalize that vehicle if they want to keep it, and as I stated, those are very strict requirements. A lot of vehicles won't even qualify, and there are other costs involved. You're going to have to pay import fees and duties. It's almost like paying on your car again. Just FYI, they do sell cars in Mexico. While I'm talking about Mexican citizenship, and again, if you want to see the requirements to get Mexican citizenship, you can watch my video on it. One of the things I didn't talk about there that I've been asked a lot, especially from people from the United States and Canada, if I get my Mexican citizenship, will I have to renounce my US or Canadian citizenship? The answer is no. If you're not from the US or Canada, you're going to have to look up that information yourself. I can't do everything for you. I'm just saying. So there you have it. Those are the 4 residency options in living in Mexico. Some people would argue that perpetual tourist is not a residency option and that I should not even mention that, but it is a popular route that people take without any kind of repercussions whatsoever, and they are in compliance with the law. So I thought I'd throw it in there. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and you didn't take the time to hit like because you weren't sure you're going to like it, go ahead and hit that before we head out for today. And until next time, hasta luego.